A little backstory is in order before I describe the encounter. I live in a small coal mining town in the mountains of southeastern Kentucky. My home is situated right beside a forest that not only surrounds our entire town, but covers multiple mountains, some of which actually have virgin forest. The mountains are littered with caves, many unexplored, and even more abandoned coal mines. On my property alone, I've seen mountain lions, bears, elk, deer, coyotes, wolves, and wild cats. I know what these animals look like and know how they behave. With that in mind, my experience from 2 years ago really stands out. It was summer, around 11:30 at night. The sky was overcast and it was extraordinarily dark. And when these woods are dark, you best have a flashlight on hand. Normally, I wouldn't have even been outside at this point in the evening, but my dog had been barking like mad up into the trees for nearly an hour. I assumed one of the local bears was roaming about, looking for a trash can to tear into, so I grabbed my handheld spotlight and went outside to scare it off. Night on these mountains is far from quiet, from night birds to crickets to the hum of cicadas. However, that night was different. It was like someone had just hit mute on the whole area. Honestly, it was unnerving. I started shining my light up into the trees, trying to see what my dog was on about. At first, I saw nothing. Then I heard movement from behind me, so I turned quickly, shining my light as far back into the woods as I could. There, about 30 feet back, was a shape. I couldn't make out what it was, but it was at least 8 feet tall. As I could see, its eyes were shining in the light. We stood there looking at each other for a moment before the shape pushed against a small tree, causing it to break at the root and fall. By this point, I was done and started back towards my door, but I knew better than to turn my back on whatever it was, so I kept my light shining in that direction. The shape went stalking up the mountainside, making very little noise in the process. The thing is, though, it kept its eyes locked on me. The light continued to reflect back from them the entire time. The next day I went back out to check where I saw it. The area was ripped up like something was making its territory, with a clear path up into the forest. There were tracks, and I honestly don't know what it was, but I know what it wasn't, and that's what scares me. I don't go outside after dark much anymore.
It had a fluid movement and a glowing body. Its fur color reminded me of a bioluminescent fish, but it had long hair, like you see in Chinese dragons. Its eyes were black and its mouth were sucking on the windows. I noticed it had a humanoid shape, but with a radioactive glow and long, elegant fur that seemed to move fluidly through the air. I backed away, and it turned its gaze to match my movement. Then I moved into the next room, and it followed me to another window. It towered over me at 7 feet to my 5'10". Definitely have mild PTSD from the experience. I've never felt more like prey. To this day, I don't know what to say. It's odd because I got a very good look at it, but it was so different than anything even my imagination could cook up. So here goes. I was unemployed at the time, 27 and living with my mom. It was July, pouring rain and around 2:45 in the morning. Staying up had become my routine since I had left my job 3 months earlier and had been filling job applications out like crazy. My mom was asleep upstairs and nobody else, except for my dog and her pen outside, was at the house. We live on an acre of land, right in the middle, and we have a 40-acre field to the south, a dirt road to the north, an orchard to the east, and a garden on the west side. Since I had become unemployed, it was normal for me to step outside for a smoke and look up at the stars. This is when I first noticed something was off. I had downloaded an app on my phone that showed me the night star's placement. It had a compass, so all you had to do was look at the screen and then look up, and you could find the stars and constellations pretty easily. Other than the porch light, there isn't any light, so if the sky is clear, the stars stick out so clearly. Anyway, I had become obsessed with learning the stars, and after about a week, I didn't need the app anymore to pick the constellations out. Except on one occasion, there would be a star in the sky, brighter than the others. It wasn't shown on the app, and if you left for a bit and looked back up, it would be gone. I started pointing it out to my family. It would hover above the field in our backyard. First, I showed my sister and friend that had spotted it during a bonfire one night. We watched for an hour and could see it move around. It would dip below the trees, move at odd angles, and sometimes just disappear altogether. A month later, I showed my brother, and he refused to acknowledge what he was seeing. But it had spooked him enough to make him stop coming around at night. Lastly, I showed my mother, and she had the bright idea to use binoculars. We didn't have a telescope, so I never got a clear look. But through the binoculars, you could see a diamond-shaped light with colorful rings around it. My niece had named it the Dancing Star, and not to frighten her, I told her it's a special wishing star, and if she saw it, to make a wish and then go inside, or it wouldn't come true. I watched the Dancing Star for a couple of months, every time I would step out for a smoke. My dog, who barks at everything, never made a sound, so I didn't feel bothered by it. I know that's silly, but I rationalized it that way to quell my anxiety. It had only come close to the house a couple of times. I called the police one, but they said it was probably a weather balloon. I posted on Reddit, and many people said the same thing. It was either a weather balloon or a drone. But the way it moved made no sense for a balloon, and how large it was ruled out a drone. I still don't know what it was, but I feel like it was connected somehow to what happened next. So, fast forward to the night in July, around 2:45 in the morning when it was pouring rain, and I was in the kitchen watching some Let's Play of Castlevania on my computer. I had just finished washing a sink of dishes and saw nothing but rain outside. My mom was asleep upstairs, and my dog quietly fenced up outside. That's when something caught my attention. It sounded like my dog had gotten out of her cage and was scratching on the window above the sink. She has never gotten out before, but that was the first thing my mind told me had happened. I jumped out of my seat and looked outside. I instantly ruled out my dog. The window was easily too high for her. She would have to be continuously jumping or even floating in the air. Whatever it was scratching for a long time, and I just stood and looked at it. Like I said, I can't describe it, and it took my mind several seconds to piece its shape together. It had like a fluid movement, a glowing body. Its color reminded me of a bioluminescent fish, but it had long hair like you see in Chinese dragons. Its eyes were completely black, and its mouth was sucking, rubbing its gums and teeth on the window. I remember just staring at it, trying to rationalize why more than what it was. When I finally had a good look, I noticed it had a humanoid shape, kinda like a Bigfoot and a swamp thing from a classic horror movie, but it had a radioactive glow and long, elegant fur that seemed to move fluidly through the air. I backed away, and it turns its gaze to match my movement. Then I move in the dining room, and it follows me. I'm actually scared now. These windows are ground level, and we keep them unlocked. I get a good look at it from head to toe. It towered me at 8 feet to my 5'10". It didn't seem malevolent, but rather playful. My dog was going crazy at this point, and instead of running away immediately, I just looked back at it. It watched me, waiting for me to make a move. But the fact that it followed me so closely, even behind walls, scared me enough to finally dart upstairs and grab a gun. I gave my mom a baseball bat and told her to come downstairs with me. If it attacked me, she was going to call the police and hide. She kept asking me what it was, but I told her I couldn't explain it. I circled the house several times and never found a thing. My dog had even calmed down. It was 3:15 when I came back in and told my mom she can go back to bed and that I was sorry. When I did try to explain, she said I had woken her up from a dream where she saw that identical thing. She called them alien gorillas. That seemed to really bother her. To this day, we don't go out after dark. I don't put too much stock into her dream, but I know what I saw. I still don't know what happened or what it was I saw. I often look out the window hoping it will show up again so I can get a picture. I've stopped looking for the star at night, and I don't hang out in the kitchen for too long either. It's honestly bothered me so much that I've found it difficult to leave the house, especially if it's dark. I found a job a month later, and I started carrying the bat with me in my car since I get home after dark. My family was spooked for a week, but now no one seems too bothered. I swear, I got mild PTSD from the whole thing, and it just vividly sticks out in my memory. I got a good look at the thing, but I couldn't draw or describe it if you paid me. Has anyone seen anything similar? Maybe a dancing star or even an alien gorilla? I hate calling them that because it isn't accurate, but that's what my family calls it. I thought I would post to see if anyone might have any ideas. Thank you for reading, and I'm sorry if this wasn't written good. I just wanted to be thorough and accurate.
At the age of 8, I was really into singing. I would sing random chants and dance around the yard, singing to the birds in the trees and so on. This time, I sang a made-up chant saying, "I'm not afraid of you, devil. God will beat you up," because I had just gotten out of church and I was feeling epic. This might sound made up at this point, but I promise this is 100% truthful. My mother was on the patio and told me to be quiet and to never say those things. I listened and continued to do my everyday routine, played with my little brother, ate dinner, took a bath, then finally I went to bed. I have insomnia, so going to sleep is very hard for me, so I stayed awake for hours in my bed. I remember it was dark in my room, and I was fidgeting with my fingers when I looked out my window. There was a white face blankly staring at me. I blinked hard to see if I was imagining it, but it was still there. We remained in eye contact for seconds until I retreated under my covers. When I looked back at the window, the face had changed to a different person with a very angry expression. Keep in mind, my room is on the second story. I looked at the face for a few seconds. Then I bolted out my door to my parents' room across the hall and slept in their bed. When I told them about it, they laughed it off and didn't believe me. I'm 16 now and remember it clear as day and still talk about it. But still, no one believes me.
This happened when I was around 16 years old. I was in high school and living in my parents' ranch home in western Pennsylvania. For several weeks, I would have a hard time falling asleep because every time I did, I would see this freakishly deformed black goat standing on two legs. It scared me, and I had several nightmares of this goat just slowly walking towards me. One night, I was absolutely terrified, more so than usual. I decided to get up and use the restroom to see if that would help me and relax and reset my brain so that I could try and get some shut-eye. As I exited my bedroom, the living room was off to the right of the hallway, and I just stopped and froze. There, in the blackest of my parents' living room, with a minuscule amount of moonlight shining through the triangular windows, was the goat man. He stood about 6 feet tall. He was menacing and felt dominating and evil. The most messed up part about this goat man was his front legs, or arms. I don't know what the hell to call them as he stood on his hind legs. But his hands were hooves, but his elbows were broken. His hooves were upside down, facing the ceiling, and he was moving slowly, but in a dancing, swaying fashion. I just dipped back into my room and closed my eyes and hid under my covers. I couldn't force myself to scream or face it any longer, so I guess I just chose to ignore it. Luckily, I have not seen this creature since. I've told all of my friends and family about it. They of course think it's hilarious, but I do think they believe me. They will bring it up in conversation as a joke from time to time and laugh because they know it scares me. I know they mean well, but even as a 28-year-old, I still get goosebumps all over my body and occasionally have tears in my eyes. I hope I never have a run-in like this again.
I have had a problem with sleep paralysis for as long as I can remember. It seems to get worse during times of stress, but I usually don't go more than 6 months without an episode, and they tend to happen in clusters. This particular episode happened around 4 years ago, and it's always unsettled me. Basically, this happened during a time when I was in the middle of a cluster of episodes, but this was the only time I've seen this particular thing. I decided to take a nap around midday on my couch. I was situated so I wasn't quite facing my living room, but I could see it if I moved my eyes. I fell asleep and suddenly woke up not being able to move anything other than my eyes and feeling like I was pushing against my mind trying to wake up. The best way I know how to describe it is like I'm in really deep water, trying to swim to the surface, but there's a current going against me. This is all fairly standard sleep paralysis stuff for me, but what I saw is not. I became aware of something looking at me. I moved my eyes to the far end of the couch, and there was something there, a few feet past the end of my couch. The creature was a light gray humanoid with long, spindly limbs. It was hairless and crouched so that its knees were more or less by its ears. It was gaunt to the point where I could see its bones through its body. I thought that it was maybe spiky as well, like at its elbows, etc. I can't remember its face anymore, and I would be afraid to come up with something in case my memory was influenced by something else. I remember this feeling of deep dread, especially because I was essentially helpless. Worse, I was in and out of consciousness, and every time I woke up again, I was still paralyzed, but it was closer. I tried to scream or move away, but I was absolutely powerless to do anything except stare at it. Then, just like that, it was gone, and I woke up for real and could move. I was shaken up, but otherwise fine, and as time went on, I wrote it off as a bad dream. Still, whenever I thought about it, I had a lump in my chest and just felt disturbed, like there was a feeling of plain wrongness to this thing.
My friend's family owns property near Osceola, Missouri. If you're ever around, there's a place called Osceola cheese that's pretty sweet. Anyway, being a rural property, I usually bring several firearms for fun. We've been doing this for years, and it's a blast every time. They recently purchased a new property with a newer, much nicer house built on it. We've stayed in it a couple of times before, and man, is it nice to have AC when it's hot and humid outside. So, one weekend, my friend's family, my sister, who's dating a member of the family, and me are all hanging out and eating fudge I bought from Cabela's. It's pretty good stuff. I'd also bought some streak ammo, having had fun with a box of the stuff the weekend before. Upstairs, there's a little room that leads to the back of the house, as the house is built into a hill. I usually keep my guns up here. I loaded some magazines alone since no one else felt like shooting. They were comfy and it was cold outside, so they didn't want to come. No problem. I never mind shooting alone. It's about 9 p.m. and, well, dark. I take my Beretta APX and 4 magazines loaded with streak ammo to the side of the barn. Here, we've dragged an old wooden picnic table so we have somewhere to sit while we shoot. I'm using my phone's flashlight to guide myself there. It's not unusual to hear coyotes at night. Those things are everywhere. They don't scare anyone here in the slightest. More of a pest than anything else. I make it to the table and sit at the corner, inspecting my pistol and loading the first magazine. I don't like to carry it with a magazine loaded since it doesn't have a safety. It clicks and I rack around, setting my phone on the slightly wet wooden surface of the table. Some bugs buzz around it, so I move it a little further away. Now, if you've ever been in the woods, at first, every rustle sounds like a footstep. It's something you gotta get over. It takes a while, but you can actually discern real footsteps of critters and deer from what's just wind in the trees. I had a steel target hanging between 2 trees, and another small tied to an old wooden gate section we'd been using to hold up cans and bottles. Sort of jokingly, I called out into the woods. This time, I said, "If you're in the woods right now, don't be." And after a few moments, I fired a shot. I heard the impact shake the bit of fence the target was tied to. I wasn't really aiming, but I figured I'd try for the steel. I slowly emptied the magazine, only hitting the steel 2 times. Not bad for literally shooting in the dark. I waved my phone light around to try and catch a glimpse of the target. The light trails beyond each bullet were fun to watch. The reason we set up our little shooting range over here was because we knew that nobody lived out that way for literally miles, and there was a hill stop about 300 yards away we used for rifle shooting. Anyway, here's where it gets a little messed up. I'm on my last magazine, and the moon began to shine down on the ground around me. My eyes are now adjusted and I've turned my phone light off so the bugs would leave me alone. I could see the trees, the house, everything in the moonlight. 17 more rounds and I'd head back in for some now cold pizza bites. I took my first shot of my last magazine, hoodie pouch carrying my 3 empties. Something happens and there's a little flash of light in the woods a little ways away from where I saw my shot land. I immediately call out, thinking it was a flashlight, or maybe the bullet exploding on a rock after possibly bouncing off my target. Unlikely, I know, but it was bright. Then I think, oh shit, did I hit a trail cam? So I went to investigate. At this moment, not scared in the slightest. The woods are still the woods, even in the absence of light. They've never scared me. I found the spot where the light flashed, but found nothing. Whatever. I turned to walk back to the table, only to see another little flash of light by the side of the barn, like a camera flash. Maybe I'd screwed up my eyes or something. I ignored it. I fired the rest of the rounds into the ground, a little ways between me and my target, watching the trails of red and green light. On my last 2 rounds, I heard something heavy fall in the woods to my left, the opposite direction of the house. It didn't take a seasoned hunter to know that wasn't natural, and it wasn't far. Maybe 50 feet at most. The trees were thinner on that side, but I didn't want to look. I turned and began walking to the house, magazines rattling in my pouch. I was halfway to the house when I heard something crawling on the table at the side of the barn. This wasn't normal animal behavior, so I wasn't having it. I opened the door, stepped inside, and turned off the light to see outside better. Standing at the corner of the barn, close to where I was sitting, was something I'd never seen nor heard description of before. It looked like a sort of skinny, large cat, but its front legs were really, really skinny. Its back legs seemed shorter. What truly scared me enough to feel like crying was its long neck and bare skin head. Its head still looked like a cat's, but its neck was about 3 feet long, with patchy fur. I didn't see any ears. I looked on for a few moments before bolting down the stairs, closing and locking the second door at the bottom. I feel like if I tell them, They'll think I'm making it up to scare them. I don't know what it was that I saw, but I know I saw it. I don't know what those flashes of light were, or why they even happened at all. If anyone knows what this might be, please let me know.